Today we'll be talking about Lu Xun, one of the great modernist writers and one of the great Chinese writers of the 20th century. We have with us today Yanping Shan, who grew up in Shanghai. And Yanping, it's interesting, Lu Xun was a great critic of the educational system. He criticized the way Chinese literature was taught, and today he himself has become part of the canon. When did you first encounter Lu Xun in the curriculum?
I first encountered Lu Xun as the topmost modern Chinese writer in high school back in China, in Shanghai. So we read his Diary of a Madman and Real Story of RQ, as well as a few of his most famous polemical essays. From these, I gradually formed my own idea of him as a kind of biting satirist. And just as you mentioned, in the Chinese curriculum nowadays, he is a very much canonized author. Our first reaction to reading him is not particularly interesting or pleasant experience, but the more that I read about him, the more interesting I found this writer to be, and the more human I found him to be.
So when you first encountered him, you were surprised or nonplussed or
Maybe
shocked, perhaps?
Not that shocked. Actually, we were led to read him as a kind of warrior, writing with his pen, like this kind of leading May 4th intellectual figure, writing against the traditional Confucianist culture. And then when I read more about him, I found that he's very ambivalent and very uncertain, and also at times dark. So for me, like, this finding is very interesting. Yeah.
So this was your first encounter in high school. Did you ever come back to him? Have you read him more recently?
Yes, actually I came back to him twice. The first time was in college. So I read him during a course called Intensive Reading of Lu Xun in college in the Chinese department in Fudan. And then, so I read more extensively about him, as well as more deeply. I revisited the story of RQ and the Diary of a Madman, and then I found him deeply interesting. So he's very ambivalent. He's at the same time very serious and playful, and he's at the same time hilarious and deeply moving and nostalgic, but at the same time very impatient with his own nostalgia. And also find that he's as much repulsed by the Chinese tradition as he is fascinated with it.
On that topic, can you talk a little bit about the language he uses? He's very critical of sort of the classical Chinese literary tradition. Does he differentiate himself from that by using a kind of different, more vernacular language, or
definitely.
not quite?
Definitely. He uses the vernacular language, so the first time in Diary of a Madman. And as he himself put it, he's using the language of the hucksters and peddlers as opposed to the standard written form of at that time. And I find his language very pithy and very biting, pungent, sarcastic. And at the same time, sometimes it doesn't read that smoothly because, like, according to his translation theory, he tries to render things directly, not to make things very smooth or comfortable for the readers.
Not a kind of standard smooth literary language.
Yeah, exactly.
So college was the second time you read him?
So the second time is in this course as a writer in the context of world literature. And I find that all the more interesting because it's a totally new experience for me. First, to read him in English and in different versions of English, and also to see him in this background with other modern writers. For example, I find him catching this modern pulse of literature so precisely, and also reflecting this modernist literary trend. For example, reading the Diary of a Madman, apart from the language, there's this very deep uncertainty of the narrative form as well as the unreliability of the narrator, which is profoundly unsettling. But this I did not find that much before until I read him again and again in this course and in English.
It shows what it takes to be a great writer of world literature, that there has to be something you come back to again and again. You don't read a great writer of world literature once. You can do precisely what you did, namely read such a writer in various stages of your life and in various contexts, including the context of world literature, and each time a different picture emerges.
Yeah, a different picture. And the picture of him in the world literature is especially fascinating. And come back to the Diary of a Madman, there are different ways of interpreting these stories. And for me, like, one of the ways to do this is to perhaps read it against the preface, vis-a-vis the preface, in which he mentioned this visitor who came to visit him, and the visitor, both he and his brother, befriended back in his school days in Japan. And then the Diary of the Madman started with, it has been 30 years that I hadn't seen this person. So perhaps Lu Xun, the older brother in the real life, is assuming the voice of a younger brother, the madman. And also he's part in this iron house, but he's waken up, but he's still part of, he is the brother of the eater of human flesh.
So there's this play with literary form and the ambiguity, uncertainty. We don't really know what happens. All we have are these two texts, the frame and then the diary, and we have to make of them what we will.
And uncertainty is like doubled or tripled through translation.
Right. Right. Well, thank you very much.
And thank you for inviting me.